Good evening and welcome to this month's Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. I'd just like to start by welcoming two new members to the committee. We've got Councillor Challoner and Councillor Stead, who've now joined us permanently. We have apologies this evening from Councillor Cooper, Renyard, Vaughan, Challoner and Rob Sanders, and I'm very grateful to Councillor Mitchell, Windle and Payne for standing in for those members who haven't been able to be available this evening. I'd like to move on to disclosure of personal and pecuniary interests. Okay. Any declarations of scrutiny interest? And is there any declaration of party political whip? Oh, thank you. We've got a really short meeting this month. It's just got one substantive agenda item. However, what this does mean is for our next meeting in September, it's going to be longer as the items that were due here were moved. So we just need to be prepared for that next month. There is a balance that needs to be struck between length of meetings and proper scrutiny, which we need to get right. As a committee, we need to seek to be focused on asking clear questions and cabinet members to have the focus on the questions being asked. As chair, I've got to keep myself and you all focused on the task at hand. Members, are you happy with the minutes of the previous meeting or a correct record? Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move straight into the item that we've got, energy procurement contract renewal, and there's clear links between this item and the Green City Charter, but I'd be really grateful if committee members could stick to the links that relate to issues such as carbon neutrality and renewable energy in their questions, rather than the wider Green City agenda. But I'm sure the committee will be interested to know when any changes to the Charter will be coming forward for discussion. Unfortunately, Councillor Galton's not able to attend the meeting. I think it's really disappointing that government have not given local authorities the same powers they gave themselves to allow virtual attendance at council meetings so that he could be here. I think it's a loss and I think he's disappointed that he can't attend. So I just can't fathom the logic of not taking it forward because we know it's been really strong for local democracy, but there we are. We are where we are. Thank you very much, Councillor Harwood, for standing in. Councillor Galton asked for this item to come to the committee whilst you're still formulating what it is you're going to look to do, which is great. But I'd just be grateful if you're able to, in your introduction, that you highlight any specific areas that you'd like the committee's input.
Thank you, Chair. As you'll appreciate, I've stood in 24 hours notice on this. It's not my portfolio. I'll do the best I can, but I'm ably backed up by Steve Guppy and Jane Hapgood. Our main energy expert, Jason Taylor's on holiday at the moment. But yeah, thank you for allowing us to bring this to OSMC. We did request that it comes because we do want your input and we very much appreciate it. And actually, I'm going to ask for your help as well, but I'll come on to that. So why are we here? We've had a look at what our energy contract is currently doing. We've decided that in the short term, which is one of the reasons why we've gone for a 2+1+1, it's in our best interest to stay with the laser consortium run by Kent County Council. A number of reasons for this. It provides us with the ability to pursue our green agenda and carbon reduction. It's cost effective. As any of you will know, paying energy bills, the energy prices have gone through the roof recently. The current laser basket of prices is based on negotiations that happened a few years ago. So the market is way above what the laser prices are at the moment. But there is a sting in the tail of that one, and that's where I need your help. The contract will allow us to look at future green electricity contract options. And that's one of the reasons why we only want the 2 years fixed contract. We want to be able to look at directly purchasing from renewable facilities in the future to try and encourage sustainable energy production. And by doing the 2+1+1, that gives us it's an emerging market at the moment, direct sustainable energy providers. So we can take advantage of that after 2 years if we so wish. The other thing it's important to remember about this laser contract is that many energy suppliers tie you in to a particular volume and tariff. The beauty about the laser contract is its size. It's circa 450 million. It's got many local authorities in it. One of the things we can do is shrink our demand during the contract if we so wish. Now, those of you that have walked around the building today will realise that the state of the building occupancy at the moment, as we go into winter, if we've got 3 people in the building, we'll still be heating the building, whether we've got three or 3,000 in it. One of the things we need to look at is another area that it's not covered by this, but is the future asset strategy. So we may decide to downsize our office provisions, and this would allow us to shrink our energy demand at that point as well. Market volatility, I touched on it earlier. Laser's flexible procurement route provides better protection generally from the combined volatility of the market, and it's been very volatile during the pandemic. So the laser portfolio is both attractive to the market and significantly enough to attract best customer prices. We also think it's got the lowest risk management of any of the options that we could choose at the moment, due to the flexibility, non-punitive measures that are in the contract should we wish to shrink it, and no lock into individual contracts, so we can switch around within the baskets available within the laser contract. Right. The laser contract, as it currently stands, is based, as I said, on a negotiated price that happened several years ago. I'm not quite sure that the officers will know when. It expires on the 31st of August. There's a chance because of, well, there's more than a chance, there's probably a probability, because of the way the market's been rising, that what's on offer after the 31st of August will be more expensive than the tariffs that are on offer before the 31st of August. So that leaves us with a bit of a dilemma, which is why we need OSMC's help on this. We can do something called a Reg 16. I'm no expert on it, but the Chief Executive can, in conjunction with the Cabinet member, pursue a procurement and bypass Cabinet and full Council. However, it requires the approval of the Chair of OSMC. So that's the good check and balance in our democracy, that we can't just, go ahead and do what we like. So at the end of the meeting, I'd like to get an opinion, if possible, from you as to whether you might be supportive of that, or whether, we need to look at longer term. The officers tell me that we could save in the circa of £1 million by going before the 31st of August. And if we go past the 31st of August, there's an opportunity, there's a high probability that we'll lose £1 million. That's probably all I wanted to say at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we move into the wider discussion, if I could just touch on that point so that we're all clear. So not signing up before the end of August, sorry, letting it lapse past the end of August could cost us £1 million, which is quite a significant amount of money. Okay, so we've got that quite clear. It's why would we not do that? But I just have a question in terms of timescales. It's why have we left it late to do this work? Because the implications are so enormous, and we know that we've got the rising energy prices. It might just help to inform some of the questions that are coming up.
The council's strategy was to use citizen energy, and it was going to be a Southampton first policy. Whether you agree with that or not, or whether it is immaterial now because it's gone. So that left us with not having that option. So we've had to look at do a quick analysis of the market. Our friends in procurement, Jane, have done some sterling work in a short amount of time for us. And we've come up with this, and it is at short notice, but the main reason is the preferred council route that we inherited in May, whether we would have changed it or not, is neither here nor there, was to go with citizen energy.
I'm just a bit confused, and this isn't a political point at all. I suppose it's more to do with how we look at procuring, because we know citizen energy was defunct quite some time ago. So I'm just, and maybe there's something to come back in written form. I'm just a little bit concerned about that we found ourselves in this position, accepting that we are in this position, but maybe we could have done some more stuff early on, so it wasn't such a rush at the end. Is a concern.
I don't know whether there's anything you can add, Jane, though, to anything I've said.
No, just that the buying windows for energy are quite long, so a short amount of time under a normal contract. This is, not a normal circumstance. So actually, with the decision-making process being so late, it might seem like a large amount of time, but actually in the energy market, it wasn't.
Chair. The 450 million of energy sales that go through laser, and this is administered by Kent. Just had a bit of a question really to do with the ethical aspects of it. Sorry, I'm waffling on a bit, Chair, but the thing is that sometimes when there's brokerages of that level of energy being sold out, sometimes somebody in the brokering position, in the middleman position, ends up raking in five-figure sums of money through the acting as a middleman somewhere in the line. What's the ethical framework around them as a provider?
The consortium is wholly public sector, so the whole of the consortium and the way it's set up is guided by public sector principles of proprietary. So I can't comment on anything in there, but it's very likely, Councillor, that it's covered by our proprietary rules, as it would be if you and I were on the board.
I've got a big long list of questions here. It's going to be really boring if I'm the only person who asks any, but I'm happy to just go ahead with them. Councillor Payne.
I just wanted to touch base on, I believe they're called REGOs, aren't they? The sort of certificates that we buy as part of our green energy. I believe suppliers are legally required to publish them once a year with our fuel mix. I just wondered whether we'd seen sight of those recently and whether they were sort of procuring green energy as such. Thank you.
I can try and answer it. We would physically purchase those REGOs, as far as I understand it. So under the previous contract, we would have possession of those that would demonstrate that they've been purchased and they relate to renewable energy that's been generated. So we're proposing again under the new contract that we would purchase REGOs. We have the opportunity to put that order for them in advance to demonstrate what we're buying is then subsequently certified. So we would physically have those available, and those, I guess those we can obtain them and circulate them if the board wishes to see them.
So we're the ones physically purchasing the REGOs, not the energy supplier?
Yes, we're buying them directly ourselves.
Okay, thank you.
Can I start? I'm going to ask a follow-up question on that, then I'll bring you in, Councillor Windle. It's just when I was reading the section on REGO and reading the annex, I got quite confused because obviously this isn't a specialist area for me. But the annex notes that Ofcom has stated there's no evidence that those green tariffs can materially support the production of renewable energy, but we're still purchasing them and adding housing to it. It just didn't seem to stack up for me. I didn't understand what the thought process is. Are we doing it even though it's not proven because it just demonstrates our credentials rather than us knowing that it really is something that helps?
Good question. I'll try and answer it because it's a huge area of debate nationally, and it's probably a subject of future reform as well. Government are looking closely at this. Now, there is an argument that there's been some investigations to suggest that the renewables market is being driven independently of the purchase of renewables. Even if you look at it at a domestic scale, if you buy a green tariff, that isn't necessarily going to push the market. The market is primarily being driven by the fact that renewables are cheaper to generate than other sources, and that's what's driving the market. So to suggest you're buying REGOs in order to support the market, there's an argument that doesn't necessarily stack up. In terms of materially demonstrating that as an organisation or as an individual that you're supporting that renewables market, they have a role to play. There is an argument that they can be purchased independently. They're not directly attached to the renewable generations. There is an opportunity for generators to buy their electricity, buy the power in one place and buy the REGOs elsewhere, and then tie the two together to make it look like a green tariff. So that is what is confusing the market generally. Unraveling that could be complicated, but in essence, a REGO is a means of demonstrating that there's that renewable capacity within the market. So as an organisation, the kind of capacity we're buying out, it does demonstrate that we're supporting that sector of the market. I guess one way of looking is what would it look like if we didn't purchase REGOs? If we weren't supporting that sector, we probably would be open immediately for criticism. They are a good stepping stone then into something looking at how we can directly buy renewables, and that is what we are exploring through this agreement. So I guess REGOs essentially, as far as we're looking at, are a bit of a kind of a gateway drug really to achieving further transparency in how we're supporting renewables.
Thank you. Councillor Windle.
Thank you. I wanted some explanation, if possible, about what the green baskets are that apparently provide a fantastic future option for the council to explore green baskets as part of our Green City Charter initiative. And I was just wondering how, how it would do it. And also, is this an opportunity that the current administration are keen to take? So it's sort of, what are they, and are they something that it's likely that we'll be going for in the future?
Yeah, the green baskets are actually made of plastic. No, they're not. It's basically, you commit with a number of partners to buy a particular type of energy supply, in this case, green generated. But it means you can go, as I mentioned earlier, you can go directly to a sustainable supplier, rather than the market mostly at the moment, I'm told, is you buy green energy through the established suppliers who may have dirty energy as well as green energy. By collecting green baskets together with other partners within the consortium, you can go direct to the sustainable and support the sustainable industry and know that it's all green energy that they're producing. That's the best explanation I could probably come up with.
And is this something that the council's minded to go for?
Definitely, which is why we've gone for a 2+1+1. It's an emerging market at the moment. The 2 years will give us cost certainty if we link in with the current baskets available, but then it's not a 4-year term that we could have had an option for, which may stop us going down this route of green baskets in the future.
That ties in with a question on my list, because in the report it says that that there's a consideration to do a detailed assessment to pursue that flexibility. Is it actually more than a consideration? That's something that's been committed to.
Yeah, we've asked procurement to do that, but as it's an emerging market, it's very difficult. But we will definitely be pursuing that as an administration.
Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chair. It's just returning to the REGOs, really. I've got 2 questions. Firstly, around the cost. There's a table on page 11 around the annual cost of REGOs split between the corporate and the housing, but the percentages of the total spend are different. So having read this, I get the idea that we buy a REGO as a certificate per megawatt or whatever it is. So surely the percentage should be the same because it's the amount of electricity we're using. So that's my first question. Second question, just to get them all out, is from what's been said, the ambiguity around the value of these things is almost like we're spending £40,000 a year, either buying a badge to say we're doing a good thing, or we're doing some offsetting, you could argue. My question is, have we looked at whether there's a better use for £40,000 in planting trees, doing green walls as a better way of offsetting our own energy usage in Southampton?
I'll start with the second question because that one's a little easier. Yes, we have. We looked at the kind of at that amount there, the total for REGOs, and how we might make an investment that might otherwise offset our carbon emissions, assuming that all those emissions were from dirty sources. Essentially, for that price, we couldn't identify anything that would be viable, and certainly nothing that we aren't already doing. That's the difficulty. We're making a significant amount of investment across the authority, generally invest to save schemes that are delivering those same outcomes, and adding another 40,000 to that probably would have little outcome, and it certainly wouldn't be transparent in being able to associate that piece of work or that activity with our power consumption and offsetting it. So yeah, that was considered. So we did conclude that effectively it can be, there is an argument there that it is greenwashing, but there is also a similar argument that it is supporting that sector. And in terms of visibility and transparency, it's probably, we conclude it was the right message to make in supporting them. So yeah, that's question 2. Question 1 was regarding the disparity in the costs between the two. I can't answer that directly. I don't know, Jane, do you know the answer to that one? So we'll probably have to defer that one and come back to you and explain that.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, we could spend 40,000 on an electric van and have REGO 1 and then next year REGO 2 running around the city. That's an alternative.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, in the papers it refers to talks about significant changes being the reasoning for the 2+2 option. I'm just wondering, is the changes you're talking about the ones we've spoke about already with the emerging market? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. It's the emerging markets and the fact that we may be able to go to these sustainable producers direct in the future, which is quite difficult today. And we feel it's quite important to support that industry if we can, when we can.
And do you think those changes will be significant enough in the next 2 years to make the difference between us doing it now and doing it in 2 years or 4 years' time?
We've obviously yet to do the work, but it could be that the energy from those producers initially is more expensive than the energy from a dirty source. So we then have to balance, you know, do we support the sustainable industry at that point in the hope and in the belief that the price will come down? Because if people don't get in there and support the sustainable industry, it won't grow and it won't thrive. So it's going to be an interesting decision. It clearly, if they're a startup company and they've got, you know, overheads to cover, it could be that their sustainable total green energy is more expensive initially. So
but that hasn't been looked into yet.
It's still emerging too much, and that's a piece of work we're committed to doing.
Just on that as well, do you think this will give us a bit of breathing space also to look into other, perhaps more bold options, such as local renewable energy generation and schemes like that, and perhaps other forms of energy generation and the ways we heat our buildings and stuff like that?
It absolutely will. And we would hope that some of those sustainable providers are local. We don't know what they will be. Technology is moving so fast in that area, as you probably know, that we can't predict what's going to be there in 2 or 3 years. You know, the solar side is just going forward in leaps and bounds. So yes, it does give us a bit of breathing space to consider where to go next, but the options are going to be very exciting in the future, I think.
Are there any local case studies that you're looking at? Because I know in some areas there's quite a lot of community energy generation already happening.
I'll have to defer that and ask Jason Taylor, because it's not my area. I don't know.
I can quickly add, we are aware on our radar that there are schemes. Obviously, opportunities within the city are fairly limited, but there are opportunities that we're aware of in terms of solar farms in the Eastleigh and Winchester area that we'll be looking at investigating in the future. You know, we're definitely open to that.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you. I'll move on to my questions if no other member has got. Okay, thank you. So we know energy prices doubled in the last 8 years, and to stay still on energy costs, we need to reduce consumption by 50% in the next 8. This line has been fed to me, obviously. But can you outline what energy efficiency initiatives the council is going to be undertaking to run alongside procuring energy via laser to address those rising costs?
I haven't had a briefing on that, Chair. I don't know. Can you answer, Steve? Yeah.
I guess this is independent. This is a scheme that's running independent in terms of cost, but it's a scheme which is looking to invest to save to reduce our carbon emissions. So we're looking at the moment at introducing a corporate assets decarbonisation scheme, which effectively is looking at borrowing capital to reduce our energy demands from our property stock and our reliance on fossil fuels. So that will be a programme that will be proposed on an annual basis. So there'll be a cost benefit analysis behind that. The funding will come partly, the majority have supported it from capital investment from the council, but there will be a business case in there in terms of showing how we can demonstrate a saving in reduced energy bills to cover the costs of that borrowing and to deliver a saving. And we're also looking at accessing government funding from the decarbonisation scheme to help support that. So the first phase of that work is underway at the moment. We're currently looking at a programme across a number of properties that's entirely supported by public sector decarbonisation scheme, and there's a second phase that comes through from capital funding for this year. So that'll be a rolling programme. we're currently establishing how that program is going to look. The plan is to try and deliver it by 2030 and see and look how close we can get to getting our corporate stock to that net zero carbon. And obviously, in the same breath, we'll be delivering energy savings as a part of that, and reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. So some of the technology we'll be looking at, that'll be an investment in PV, in air source and ground source heat pumps as well, will deliver the same outcomes.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just wondering, within that, has there been any consideration as to what role green hydrogen might play in the future energy mix of the city?
We're having some conversations about where hydrogen lies at the moment. It's very complex. The problem we've got at the moment with hydrogen is that if you're looking at it in terms of a network, trying to differentiate whether it's green hydrogen or any other type of hydrogen is very, very difficult. There are conversations going on at the moment. We can look at generating hydrogen locally off the network and using it for schemes like in transport and being entirely confident that it's green hydrogen. There are other conversations with Southern Gas Network, and they're looking at the feasibility of introducing hydrogen into the gas network. We'll have to see how that pans out and what role it will have to play. We're certainly looking at some feasibility work at the moment, looking at district heating. That's a big opportunity in terms of our fuel bill, and looking at other stakeholders and partners in the city. Part of that transition at the moment, some of that, certainly a significant amount of that district heat is reliant on gas. As part of that transition, hydrogen may well have a role to play, or it might be that some of those heat sources can look at things like ground source heat pumps, or other energy sources. That's all in the mix, and hopefully we'll see that work itself out over the coming years.
Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chair. It was just on the back of that around our own geothermal power source, heat source in Southampton. This is a slight tangent, but it is down the green energy piece. How does that sit within our energy production? I was led to understand it doesn't actually produce any electricity, it's just heat in Southampton. Is there any plans going forward to try and deal with that issue and make use of it?
Yes, you're correct. It's there. It's generating heat as part of the district heating scheme. It's independently run by, I'm not too sure the firm was, it was previously NG. I know they've changed recently. All of that, the city centre part of the network, and there are other elements of the network that are run by what was formerly NG, are being reviewed at the moment as part of the feasibility work that we're doing, looking at heat networks, and where the opportunities might lie in decarbonising them, and extending the scope and scale of them to provide further benefits to not just the council but to other stakeholders. So there's a full review that is due to be published. I believe it will be next month to report on what options we've got available, and perhaps some recommendations to how we can work with partners, develop those ideas.
Thanks, that's really helpful. Oh, Councillor Savage, did you want to come in on that?
I think it's sort of just a little bit on the back of that when talking about hydrogen. I know it's a slightly different situation, but in Liverpool they've taken receipt of a large number of hydrogen buses as part of the transport mix there. And there's a whole lot of other initiatives which I'm not sort of hearing about that would contribute, I suppose, to the change and the reduction in our energy mix and to the energy that we'd be having to procure. Have we looked at things like LED lighting, for example, and does that have a big impact on the on our energy bills, or is that going to be displaced by increased costs for conversion and things like that? And there's a whole lot of other things really that you know could be a big factor in all of this. I mean, sorry, I'm saying a couple of questions at once here, but you referred, for example, at the very beginning, Councillor Harwood, the issue to do with our estate and people working in this building, for example. So where does that work out in terms of our overall strategy and where we're going with this? Because it seems as if we're not quite sure yet about where we're going to go with them.
The future property assets strategy was ongoing at the start of the pandemic and was sort of kind of delayed for various reasons. And it was all about, at that point, smarter ways of working, it was called, which was basically cramming people into the Civic with no distance between them at all, which obviously is not now de rigueur anymore. So the project is paused, but is continuing as they look at what our future requirements are. The problem is we don't know what our future requirements are. We've said our smarter ways of working now is an average of 40% of the workforce in any one time, and they have to book desks. From what I've seen in the last few weeks since we've come into that system, it's a very low percentage actually in the building. So I've asked officers, because it's in my area, my portfolio, to monitor it until Christmas, and then we'll take a look at what our real requirements are for office space. And I've just got a gut feeling it's going to be more like 15–20% max. And we can't carry on heating and lighting this building for that numbers of people. We'll have to do something with it. It's just not economic to carry on like that. But that's, you know, that is, we're in the realms of the unknown here. How people's working patterns are going to change. People seem to be carrying on as they were at the moment, which is fine.
From that, could we have a future scrutiny item to come as to what your future will be, to update on the discussion we had a couple of months ago? That would be really useful.
It'll have to, because it'll have to go to full council.
If I could just touch on the question you mentioned about street lighting. Yes, that is being reviewed as part of our corporate assets decarbonisation scheme. So there's discussions currently underway. Jane may be familiar with them, with the providers, but for our street lights, there's existing contracts that needed to be renegotiated in order for us to start a phased introduction of more energy efficient LED lighting amongst it. And that is, I think the first phase of that is imminent.
Well, just out of interest, what's the sort of the difference in the usage? You know, if we were completely LED compared to what we've got now in terms of sodium lights, I suppose, or something like that.
I can probably talk to that, because sadly I've got a bit of experience in that area. When we let the PFI contract in 2010, LEDs were too expensive at that point, but the supplier we did agree a program where we'd have so many LED fund that we could spend. And at the time, we spent it on the Itchen Bridge, the QE2 mile, the parks, and some of the main roads that use lots of high wattage energy. We took a decision at the time to go with, it's not just the bulbs in lighting, it's the switchgear and the dimmers and things like that. We've got completely modern switchgear in our 17,000 items of lighting equipment now. So normally if you're doing a PFI, if you're doing an LED conversion, you'd make much bigger savings than we can make, because you change all of the drivers, all of the switchgear and things like that, and it'd all create extra energy savings. We've already got that. So we've got a proportion, probably about 10% of our lights are currently LED. What the officers are bringing forward now is, and we are in negotiation with, and it's complex with PFIs, as you can imagine, is to basically any of our high wattage areas like main roads, we're going to try and convert to LED, and we're going to do a invest to save program for that, and the payback will be somewhere between 5 and 7 years depending on what we do. But there'll be maintenance. We haven't quantified it yet. There'll be maintenance benefits as well, additional savings, because you don't have to maintain them often enough. The residential lights on your average residential street in Southampton are so low at the moment, and they dim down to 30% at midnight anyway, that the benefit of putting LEDs in at this point in time doesn't stack up.
Thank you. I just want to move back to the laser framework, because the report's really clear that it's the recommended one to ensure continuity. But what the report isn't giving us is any information on why that demonstrates best value compared to other frameworks. And that probably would be useful for the final report that goes to Cabinet, just for transparency, so people will be able to see what's discounted and in the other frameworks that are there. So it's more of a recommendation rather than a question to answer here. Could you just summarise what the most challenging decisions are for this item?
The ones that I know politically, and that's how long to go for the contract was one of the most challenging. you know, do we want to continue with a consortium as large as Laser, when we might want to go down sustainable routes of our own in the future? That was probably the biggest one that was brought to my attention, was the length of contract and the type. But I don't know whether there's any more.
Well, there was obviously the debate we've had about REGOs, which we've had internally. So that was something I think we've reached a fair conclusion on. But yes, we'd still be looking for some kind of guidance or support on whether that's found to be the right direction to go in.
Just sorry, I had made a note to myself which I missed. It would be really useful, considering the conversation we've had on energy usage, if maybe the reduction in energy usage is brought back to this committee as well at some point to discuss. I mean, I suppose it is in line with the wider way of working, but I personally am interested in. I know many of the other committee.
Sorry, one thing a cabinet member did mention to me when he was briefing me for this was he said he's quite happy to bring back a bigger picture in terms of our green agenda and what we're doing on that, including energy reduction at future dates, if you so wish.
We would wish that very much, and it would be great if we could get that into the agenda, into the calendar. Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, this might be a question for a future wider discussion, but is there any consideration with regards to bringing energy costs down to making our buildings, particularly housing, more energy efficient?
Well, that would be covered by the corporate assets decarbonisation scheme that I mentioned. So that is the principles behind that are energy reduction first, before we then looking at the sources of heat or energy within those properties. So fuel efficiency, energy conservation being key across all of that. So yeah, that is a programme we're looking at introducing in a phased approach, hopefully to deliver about 130 properties over the next 10 years in a prioritised manner that would reduce costs and carbon.
Can you give us any early indications as to what that would be, retrofitting or insulation? Or
I can give some examples of what we're looking at the moment. It would depend on property to property by property. But for example, and I suppose it comes as a bit of a surprise, but one of our priority sites is the Marlins car park, which initially people would not associate with having high energy usage. It's unoccupied, it's a car park, but that's essentially got lighting, fairly low efficiency lighting going 24/7. So the scheme there is looking at replacing that with not only with energy efficient lighting, but a system in there that the lighting will only operate when it's actually required and needed. There's an opportunity then to put a solar canopy on the roof to generate energy, and a means of using battery storage to make sure that we can utilise that energy in the most cost efficient way, not only just with the lighting, but return to grid, but also the fact that we're going to put extend the EV charging infrastructure in there. So it means that we can essentially sell our own energy directly through that resource. So that's just one example. When we get into other properties, yeah, the principles will be fundamentally trying to make them more energy efficient. So that would be through insulation, either glazing, wall insulation, internal wall insulation, external wall insulation, floor insulation, and roof insulation. Each property is different, so there'll be a detailed analysis in terms of looking at the cost benefits of that and making sure that we've got a model that delivers not only carbon reductions but that cost benefit saving, so it stacks up.
Any other members with any questions? So we were asked a question at the start of the meeting, and that was whether or not we'd be happy for for me to agree to Reg 16, so this decision can be made before the end of August and hopefully get us £1 million of savings. Is there anybody got any objection to that? No. So we're happy to do that.
Okay, it would still need to be formally brought back to you though, Chair, as a specific item for decision. Thank you.
You'll just there'll be an email process and you'll agree verbally to sign it off and process will follow. But it'll be an officer decision, is that right? So, and again, the officer decision will come with a report and a set time. So
it's an officer decision because it doesn't involve Cabinet or Council, to the chair of OSMC.
And there will be a decision report that goes with it, so there will be some transparency as well.
Thank you very much for coming and answering our questions. Very grateful for you giving up your time for that.
Do you want me to run through the recommendations, Chair? The first recommendation is just, can we provide the clarity of the diversity, disparity of costs and percentage in table 11 regarding the corporate and the housing portfolio. Another recommendation that the decision report provides additional information on the advantages of the laser framework compared to alternative energy frameworks, so a little bit more detail there. And there's a recommendation for the committee to have additional items at future meetings. So there's a recommendation to update the committee on the way we work programme, specifically relating to the conversations you're going to be having sort of December time regarding office attendance and what that means for our portfolio. And the other recommendation, I'm looking to Steve here with regards to a timely moment for this committee to have that wider conversation regarding the Green City Charter, as well as some of the energy reduction considerations. So where are we? I know you will have had the conversation, or you may have had the conversation with Councillor Gorton. Are we looking October, November? Putting sort of words there.
I'd have to refer that to the cabinet member.
Fine.
To see what he's comfortable with.
Again, if we can have that conversation so we can get it agended. Thank you.
So the final item this evening is monitoring scrutiny recommendations to the executive. I just had one question on the notes that we've got, and that relates to the destination management plan. The final question we'd asked was about the additional resource, which was discounted in the three options. The middle option was chosen. A question was specifically asked, what was the opportunity cost of that? And I don't feel that the answer that we've given really answers that question, and it would be grateful if Mr. Pearney, you can go back and ask for further detail on that.
I will do, and obviously there is an expectation that there is a developing plan for that item, and that will come back to this committee. So again, that gives you another opportunity to talk about those issues.
Members, do you have any questions on the report? No? Okay, thank you very much for your time this evening.